and I'm so glad that everybody's taking the time that is here. Obviously, you realize the value of learning strategies and approaches for mental health. It's increasing. We have a lot to cover, so let's get started. Just to let you know, my role as a clinical case manager is to help with the students with highest needs and highest acuity. So that's one of my specialty. And I do address the needs of distance learners at the University of Florida. Let's discuss the title, just that itself is Seeing Green, because green represents the mental health needs for students. The first slide, we're going to talk about the learning objectives. Okay, so we're going to be able to identify the mental health needs for the general population and some of the challenges related to the distance learners. We're going to hope that you're able to select appropriate this is very basic strategies for students that are experiencing mental health distress. And then we'll be able to have a general idea of how to provide support and recommend resources to students when they are experiencing mental health distress. And you will be able to identify what to consider when creating a syllabus, and that's going to foster some students feeling supported should they experience mental health challenges. If at any point what I discuss or what we discuss here evokes any painful reaction or you're triggered by something I say, please feel free to leave the session. You will not offend me. This is being recorded. So if at any point what I say or you read you find triggering, please feel free to exit. So let's just start by talking about numbers. I specifically picked Active Minds. Active Minds is a student-led chapter organization. It was started by a student whose brother died by suicide, and she decided to do something about it. There are over 600 chapters of student-led or Active Minds all over the country, and they do a lot of surveys, which provides a lot of counseling centers and universities information. If any of you are interested in start a chapter, they are very involved. They're a great resource for college students. So look them up, okay? Active Minds. But suicide is the second leading cause of death among college students. 39% of college students experiencing mental health issues. 50% of the cases showed onset by the age of 14, 75 by the age of 24. And I want you to really think about that, because that's about the age where we get them in the college setting. So a lot of mental health is onset during that time. And then 2/3 of students with anxiety and depression did not seek treatment in this survey. 280 people of the survey, and I could definitely send you the link. 280 people did not decide to go through a suicide attempt for every person that decided that had an attempt. So if you think of those numbers, for every attempt, there's 280 people who thought about it but didn't actually have an attempt. 67% of college students first tell a friend before they're feeling suicidal. It didn't address how many tell professors or mentors, but hot off the press today, Forbes had a great article where they surveyed students who had already graduated, and 17% of the students, it was over 1,000, 17% said, yeah, my university, my college did a fantastic job at supporting me, and I saw mental health as a priority. It was an additional 28% said, yeah, they did an okay job. That's a little less than 50%. And there were some that said, I don't know. So obviously, there's still some work to be done in that area. There's a survey that's provided to the directors, and we, at the counseling centers, we get a lot of our data from this, and a lot of the work that we're doing is guided by some of this information, and it's usually across the board pretty consistent. They did a survey for when a student comes in, if they have some form of technology of keeping record. At the University of Florida, we use Titanium. So in Titanium, the student will come in, and we know information that we've sent out to them. And so there's record of why they come in, their age, they're a pretty standard demographic. and almost every counseling center collects this information. So that's how the counseling center directors are able to gather this data and add it up. So the most frequent reason why students went to a counseling center was anxiety. That is nationwide. And the second was depression. Some of the other concerns involved specific relationships. Those involved romantic, friendship, professors. Sometimes they weren't their professors, but dissertation chairs, relationships with them. Another reason is family concerns. Maybe there's an illness in the family. I had a student who came in because her father had suffered a medical episode, and that left him not being able to take care of himself. And she was distraught because she didn't know what to do. Her parents were divorced. She felt responsible. So it's not necessarily somebody that, the student themselves, but somebody very close to them. Financial needs for the family, food and housing insecurity. I have a student who's taken some online courses this summer, lost his job, and then received some aid. And then his mother said, look, I don't have any food. So some of the aid that he received, he actually shared with his mom, and he's expecting her to pay him back. Domestic violence, especially if students, domestic violence has increased because of COVID, but especially if a student is online, more than likely they are not living in the college. It's not a college experience where they're sitting with their friends and, they're living in the dorm or they're living in an apartment. A lot of the time they're living with their families. Rejection from family, especially what I see a lot of the time is the LGBTQ or faith or political views now as they differ. I have had students who have been told that they're not welcome if they voted for a specific candidate. Suicidal thoughts, because a student expresses suicidal thoughts does not mean they're actively suicidal, but suicidal thoughts are definitely something that brings a lot of students in. Eating disorders, addiction, academic performance, if they're experiencing difficulties or they're not performing up to the standard that they're accustomed to. This is very evident in top performing students, and then also in students who come in and they're first generation or students from marginalized groups. They may experience this, how do I measure up to other students, or I'm not good enough to be here. How did I even get in? And so that also brings them in. Sleep disturbance. Social isolation and loneliness is huge. This generation right now that is going through college is the loneliest generation. They did a survey recently, which was very interesting, and I'll share a little more with you. But the bottom line is that they're the most connected with technology, but they are experiencing loneliness, which again is exacerbated by COVID because now they're losing their supports. But they're definitely a very lonely and isolated generation. At times, you wouldn't think it. It's very interesting because no matter, I find students from all walks of life, whether they have friends on the outside, on the inside, a lot of them still feel lonely. And also significant previous mental health treatments. Maybe they came in already knowing they had a mental health condition and they want help in managing that, or they want help in referring, or they want help in making sure that they're aware of what supports are in place for them. So those are the big things. There are others, I'm sure, but that is what this survey stated, and I think they're pretty consistent today. Next slide. And so for distance learners, and just as a caveat here, I just want to make sure, clarification, transparency. I want you to know that I have, will have in the fall 3 sons attending college, and one of them is a distance learner. He is receiving his complete degree online. So I noticed the difference in working at a university. I noticed the difference for students who are exclusively online or maybe taking a class online of other challenges. Are these the only challenges? Absolutely not. I'm sure you guys can share a lot more challenges that these students experience. But sometimes distance learners are perceived to be more mature. You know, hey, they took online learning. They probably got it. They probably know what to do. Or maybe there's implicit biases about maybe they're older. They should be more mature, right? Um, while online learning has increased exponentially, what hasn't increased is the level of services to these students. One of the reasons I've seen as a roadblock is that students. So, for instance, if I'm enrolled completely in as a distance learner, I have to pay fees in addition to be able to receive them. A lot of the time, the students who are taking online classes are students from marginalized groups or maybe not able to attend because they can't leave home, they can't afford the dorms. So we're asking them to pay an extra health fee, which is fair, but the health fees are not separated. So in other words, if I am a student and I'm attending the Hillsborough Community College or Hillsborough College, and they have a fee that I have to pay. Well, it's about, let's say, $800. That means that I have to pay the entire fee. There's no option for me to pay only maybe $100 or $200 fee for a mental health service fee. So it's not broken down, it's an all or nothing, which means that these students don't have access sometimes because they can't afford it. They can't afford to pay an entire fee. Or the service is not available to them because the student affairs department hasn't actually caught up with the services they offer, or maybe the technology is not available. It could have technology. That actually was a good thing that came from COVID, because we went from having almost not a lot of people providing online services to our entire center becoming virtual in a matter of weeks. It was incredible to have us all learn and log in, and now students are Zooming with us. Not only are we providing one-on-one service for counseling, but we have groups that we're running. But not everybody's up to par with that, because the reality is that as counselors, we're not really trained. That's something completely new. That's going to open up a whole new field. But that it is growing. Another reason is that it can be easier to miss symptoms. You know, if a student comes in and they're disheveled, or their appearance changes, or they look tired, or they're not engaging, they're staring into space, that's visible to a professor. But when you're not seeing them face to face, that's more challenging. And then if the professor doesn't see them and the student is not on campus, okay, well, I don't know what's available. I'm just going to suffer in silence, which there's a lot of students that suffer in silence even if they do know that the services are available. It can also be, at times I've heard from professors and students, that it can be harder to connect. And what does connect mean? It means I trust that you have an interest in my learning, and I trust that I can go to you if I, and the professor trusts that they can come to me. And this at times when we're not meeting face to face can be a challenge. And then the fee, which I talked about earlier. And then sometimes professors just, or curriculum designers or librarians, you know, to me, it takes a village. It's not just the counseling center that has and should have all the responsibility for the mental health of a student. It is a community effort. I think that the counseling centers champion for mental health, but it has to be a complete, the responsibility of the entire university. But if the professors are not aware, or even the curriculum designers or librarians, if they're not aware, or academic advisors, they have to be aware of what is available. Because not only within the content of a brick and mortar building, but also what's available to a student who is not here. What's available to a student who is taking classes maybe in a different city, in a different county. Maybe they're doing an internship. So being able to look for those resources can be a challenge for professors. And also, the other thing is that that's not really their expertise. That's not really what they're trained to do. So we'll talk a little more about that later. But these are just some of them. I think there's a myriad of other reasons, but these are the ones that stick out to me that I have encountered and I've helped students address. And again, I'm sure these are not the only ones. Next slide. And I know that we're running a little short on time because I'm probably going a little bit, but I want to share this Eden story with you. So Eden is an 18-year-old African American who identifies as female. She came in reporting she was feeling sad and not really, she's meeting new people, or at all, she's not meeting them. The transition to college was hard. She describes herself as very shy. She did great in high school, top of her class. Thinks this fall semester she's probably going to fail it. It's November. She doesn't know what to do. She's doing an online degree at the University of Florida and decided that she wanted to live on campus because living on campus was very important to her. And so she came here, but it hasn't helped. She's feeling pretty isolated, pretty lonely. So if we go to the next slide. Okay, this is what she came here for, originally what I read to you. This is actually what was going on. After interviewing her and discussing what was really happening, if you're speaking to a student and saying, oh yeah, I'm feeling kind of lonely, my transition here hasn't been that great. But this is really what was happening with Eden. She's a first generation. She's questioning her sexuality, which would not be accepted by her family of origin. She's experienced some symptoms of depression since 9th grade, but never said anything because they don't believe in mental health problems, and they're just going to tell her to deal with it and stop whining. She rented the apartment to find friends, but really doesn't go anywhere and stays home most of the time. She is completely isolated. By completely, I mean completely. Was even ordering food at one time so she didn't have to leave the apartment. Looks in the mirror and says she's ugly, she's unlovable, there's no way anybody's going to care for her. She has a history of practicing NSSIB, which is non-suicidal self-injury behavior. She was cutting. And she had thoughts of dying by suicide daily, and the thoughts were increasing. I was very concerned. So if we go to the next slide. Before I go into these, I was very concerned about Eden. We met regularly. Actually, the first 2 weeks we met 3 times, and I would call her. We finally, this semester, she ended up having to medically withdraw from the semester. She ended up going home, eventually becoming hospitalized, but came back and was able to pay the semester fees for services. She is now attending group at the counseling center. She has a provider, which I helped her find. She was able to receive some financial aid and was able to pay some of the hospitalization bills. We were able to work with the Shands, and they were able to, charge her $50 a month because she has a part-time job. And so post-hospitalization, she has the support she needs. She has a counselor, she has group, she has myself, she has the Dean of Students office. This is an online student, but she's receiving all the services at the university. But what about a student who, doesn't have just the needs that Eden said, reported? What about if they're experiencing housing insecurity and their students online? Food insecurity. I can't tell you the amount of students at the University of Florida that have come to me and are experiencing food insecurity. Students who have been homeless, who were sleeping in the library at night and taking a shower at the rec center. So this is not just about, colleges or Miami-Dade College or Broward. This is happening everywhere, and I'm suspecting that it's going to increase because of COVID and people losing their jobs. Immigration status, there are students who do have concerns. I have had students who are taking online classes because they've been afraid that, at one point I had one student who was afraid that they were going to be picked up by ICE and be taken away. Being on the spectrum and transitioning to college, the University of North Florida, I saw there's somebody from there, shout out to them with their Thrive program. We actually have, I was part of organizing I would say it's a collaboration between the Counseling Center, DRC, and the local, I guess it's national, Center for Autism that we have here, and it's called Social Gators. Students who are on the spectrum can be isolated. They do have challenges transitioning to college. They're not sure how to express at times their needs, and so supporting them is really important. Reaching out to them, because they can fall through the cracks really easily if you're not on the lookout for their needs. Being a student of color can pose a problem because, and also culturally, do I ask questions? Do I express how I feel? Do I say what I need? That's important. LGBTQ victims of crime, student, who are online learners, if they are victims of crime, that's not visible to you. I had a student who came in with a very bruised face and had been a victim of an incident of domestic violence when the student went home. Well, that's visible, but when you're online, that's not. Not having transportation. So for instance, a student who is online maybe taking those courses because they don't have transportation to go anywhere. So getting resources might be more difficult. And not knowing how to navigate through large institutions is probably and marginalized groups that I've encountered. So again, those are some, not all, but I think those are other challenges that students, both from online distance learning students and also brick and mortar students experience. And the next slide. So now you have all this information, which is a lot and can be really overwhelming. What do you do with it, right? Well, there have been a few articles that I come across in the past and really did a great job at what do I do with this information? I've actually myself been an online learner. And there were some classes that were easier and there were some classes that were exhausting for me. And so what I realized was that some of the classes were more exhausting for a reason. If they involved groups, and we're going to talk more about that during the second training. There were some classes that posed more challenges, but there were general things that you can do. And we're going to talk about those right now. If you want, so what are some of the things that you guys can type in the chat session? What are some of the things that you think you can do for your students, given all that information that I've given you? And we can give you 2 minutes to do that. This is fantastic. Yes, you're correct. So some of these are the things we're going to talk about, and this is a great start. I think if you can, Tom, guide me to the next slide. This is fantastic because what you're saying is I want to know more. I want to share my information. I want to make myself more available. I want to be able to a climate check-in survey. That's fantastic. And during the next presentation I'm going to do, there's actually a universal. Some universities do that for students coming in. They do a universal check-in, and if they see that there's some numbers that are high or elevated risk, they provide that student the information. But definitely everything you guys are saying is excellent. Those are awesome. This is why you're here, right? Because you have this interest. So one of the things, there was a great article put out by a few years back, and they talked about this was specifically put out for professors to look out for 3 types of behavior. And one of them was specifically, let's look at what's not typical, what's atypical for this particular student. And Tom, if you could take me to the next slide. The second one was, okay, this is just this one particular student. It's atypical, right, for them. And I know I had a bit of an issue because of the work I do with my students on the spectrum, but this is how they identified it, not typical behavior, but then unusual behavior. And what Barr discusses is behavior that's abnormal in a college community, right? For anybody, and this could include paranoia, ongoing magical fantasy, fantastical thinking, or actions which interfere in the learning atmosphere. This is a student that might, well, we'll discuss a little more what they might do, and then there's poor academic performance. These are three completely different things, right? So maybe the student is doing well, and let's go to the next slide and we'll go into more specifics. Okay, so these three are the ones for academic performance only. So if they're not turning in assignments, if they're falling asleep in class, if they're being disruptive, like, not disrupted in a way that's not concerning, but more what other students might call extra. But they're not returning emails, not attending class, they're not participating. When they do, they're not waiting their turn. That's stuff that is academic performance is being impacted. However, that doesn't mean that these might not be present for students. So let's look at the other two. And Tom, would you go to the next slide? Okay, so that's different, right? So it's different if the content of the work becomes suddenly very dark, very negative. There are students who will sometimes express their emotions in the work that they do, and that's different. Also, if the emails are suddenly very accusatory or manipulative, or they're sexually inappropriate, that there's a different feel to. So that's something that you guys can very specifically look for. I mentioned earlier, the behavior that's bizarre, if the person is disoriented, they're confused, they don't know what day it is. They don't know. I had a student who came to me and said, I know the professor was talking to me. I could hear what he was saying in my mind. We were communicating while I was in the class. And she, of course, it's important to validate her experience, but she was convinced that they were communicating while he was teaching other students. That's different if there's a failing quality of work. That's that academic performance and late assignments. And I will send you this article, by the way, at the bottom. Anybody who's interested in getting this information, I have a document that I'm going to send this out to because it's very specific. But the bottom line is there's three different things. Is it academic? Is it impacting their academic behavior? Is it just behavior that's unusual to them because something's changed? Or is it so out of the norm that you feel you need to get help from somebody else? Okay, next. Okay, so why are professors not reaching out? Well, first of all, this is beyond the scope of the description, right? It's just like a lot of time teachers don't reach out. This wasn't their training. They didn't sign up for this. You're asking me to do what? And they may be concerned about blurring boundaries. There was an article in Canada about a professor who felt so bad for a student that the professor started to pay because the student couldn't afford online classes. Online counseling. And so the professor started to help students pay. So where do you blur the lines where you're the professor and you're doing too much? Then the professors may be confused, or the librarian may be confused, or the academic advisor. Well, what do I do with this student? Or maybe what the student experiencing is something that's triggering for that person. Maybe what they're experiencing brings out a lot of pain for the person that's providing the support. And then, so we're going to skip the roadblock because of time, Tom, and we'll get to the following one. Tom, you can just go ahead and go to the next one, just in the interest of time. So what can you do? So when you're looking at your classes, it's important for you to provide mental health education links. Look at the colleges they're signed up with. make yourself familiar with the services that those colleges provide. They might be able to attend free workshops. They might be able to attend stress reducing activities. They may, I know Gatorwell just starts next week or in a few weeks. They are offering a mindfulness class free for students for 6 weeks. Make yourself aware of what's happening on the campuses where students are going. Also, crisis services. Display those phone numbers somewhere in your syllabus or when the classes are being designed, because you can, and again, I don't know what county you're all working with, but if the students are registered, and it's important for you to have those services available in those counties. Self-help. There are a lot of tools that are self-help, and I'm going to go a lot deeper into those. Recently, they did the Hope Project created an app called the Nod app, and it was as a result of COVID, and it's for students who are feeling lonely. This app is free, and the students can download it. So there are some self-help things that they can do if they're not clinically, if their needs are not so clinical that they need to see somebody. If they're refer them to the Disability Resource Center. If their mental health needs are impacting their learning, then referring them to the Disability Resource Center can be good, because a lot of the time I work really close with the DRC, with the Dean of Students office, with the Student Health Center. That communication and that collaboration is important. I refer to them a lot. They refer to the counseling center a lot. And it's important that they receive the accommodations that they need. A student I was recently working with had no idea. First generation, said, yeah, I have depression, I have anxiety. Came in, started telling us how many times he had done drugs in the past year. It turns out he was self-medicating because he didn't know there was availability to see a psychiatrist. He's now taking medication. The client is now also taking, has accommodations, is seeing a counselor, and the student has gone, he's totally clean and passed the semester and is doing fantastic. Again, that referral. And then counseling services. There are some counseling services that are free. There are some counseling services that are on. I will again provide you with some national services like Psychology Today. If you have a student that can pay, that is available for them to find services. But they're also, I see someone put a Mood Path as a free app. If you guys, what I would love for you to do, if you would like, send me some of these resources. I can put them all together and this document so all of you can have them. We'll discuss more. But these are just some of the very simple, basic things that you can do for now, okay? And next slide. No, we're running short on time. Okay, so more specifics. Prior to starting class, communicate approachability. It's important that at any time that a student is facing a difficult time, that you make yourself open and that you send that energy out of, I'm here for you. Difficulties in personal lives, they happen. And if they do, I encourage you to reach out to me. I've experienced difficulties. And when I was going to college, I would have loved to have a professor or a mentor or an academic advisor that was going through something difficult. Make yourself human. Make yourself open and available. They're going to know. Students are sponges. There's a research that came out, I think it's in the book at Blink, that within seconds, a student says whether they're going to be successful in that class or not, within seconds of sitting in front of a professor in a class. Well, that's harder to happen when it's virtual. If you have that information, though, on Canvas, or if you have that information on your syllabus, and if you take that approach of availability, they're going to sense that, okay, this person is more approachable. So the next is validate students who allow themselves to be vulnerable to you. It takes a lot of courage. There's a great book called Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown, and it takes a lot of courage to come out and say, hey, I've never met you. I've never even interacted with you personally, but I'm going through this really difficult situation. Suddenly, I can't get out of bed, or suddenly I haven't slept for 5 days and I don't know why. And I'm having to take more, or I'm having to take more of my Adderall, and I'm really scared because it's making my heart race. And so when somebody comes to you and opens up and says, hey, I need help, or I want you to know about my lived experiences, to really honor that and value that, because this is so important. And then offer help that is within your scope. So you'll work on the academic piece, right? I'll work with you. What do I need? What do you need? What can I do? Will an extra few days help you? And then if not, refer them to someone that's better equipped. Well, you can certainly say, I don't know how to help you with that piece, but I know where I can refer you. And so that is really important, allowing yourself to provide the support that you can, and then also being aware of what you are not equipped to do, but being open to the idea that you can help them find those answers. Okay, and then the next slide. Okay, and making your syllabus mental health friendly. Consider adding a statement to your syllabus, and we're going to work on that the next time. What should it say? For mental health needs. Consider adding resources to your syllabus. Maybe you could say, hey, in Alachua County, the crisis center is, the suicide prevention hotline is, adding phone numbers to the care team or the support team in the Dean of Students office, adding the counseling center phone number. For our counseling center after hours, we have protocol, which a lot of colleges and universities have. And they don't have to be a student that has paid the semester fee to call. If they're a student, somebody's there after hours, because just like they can call us and they would refer to me for support outside of the college, there's still a number that they can call, whether they pay the semester fees or not. So having that phone number there where they can at least, it's a starting point, right? And there is a number after hours. Having that in your syllabus. And remember that not one entity, that not one of you is responsible for all this information, but making your syllabus and your Canvas pages very friendly to people who are experiencing or might experience mental health issues. Okay, next. Okay, so Cognito, the University of the Board of Governors required all professors to be trained in Cognito. Cognito is also free at the University of Florida. Anybody on campus can actually use it. Make yourself familiar if you haven't, because they give specific training for faculty, but it also gives everybody insights on how to respond for students who, just for signals to look for. It's different because they're distant learners, but it does give you a good idea of just what to be on the lookout for. It's a good training. I recommend it. I've done it, and I think it's really good. Next. I think that's it. Yep. And these are the resources that I told you I'd be sending out. And I think the last one is my name and email address, and we have 10 minutes for questions and answers.